And now, Understanding the Times with Jan Markell, the program committed to helping you contend for the faith and view current events through the lens of the Bible. Here's Jan Markell.
Again, welcome to the program, everyone. I'm so glad you could be with me this particular hour. You know what? We're going to talk about a new concept this hour. We're going to kind of keep it at a level that everyone can understand, because I think the concept and the word itself is going to be new to most of you. But is it really new? I think that's probably the bottom line question here. Is it perhaps just the personification of the Genesis 3 lie that we can be like God, that we can become God or gods, we can live forever? We're going to talk about what's known as transhumanism. The dollars behind this effort, I got to tell you, are too large to say that this is only a passing fad. So this movement is here to stay, and even the U.S. Department of Defense, NASA, and others are on board. Look, after all, the Department of Defense wants to create the perfect soldier, superhuman, yet human. Where will Christians come into this? Will it be okay with Christians if we're just thinking about changing and altering the DNA so that they might live to be 150 in good health? What's wrong with that? Now, my guest says that some of this could succeed, but what kind of a body count would we leave in the attempt at transhumanism? And he sort of likens this, and we'll discuss it, to the aspirations of communism. Well, there was some success, but look at the gross fatalities. My guest this hour is Carl Teichrib. We'll give contact information just a little bit later, and you've heard Carl on this program before. So, Carl, welcome back to Understanding the Times Radio.
It's great to be with you, Jan.
Now, I'm not sure, understanding the times and understanding transhumanism, and who came up with this idea other than the snake in the garden, we shall all be like God?
It's an idea that's been around, technically speaking, from about 20 years. It's a fairly new movement, and yet its roots go back a long, long ways. And in your introduction, you brought up Genesis chapter 3. In many respects, Jan, this is nothing more than a repeat of the old lie of Genesis 3. And as many of your listeners will know, in Genesis 3, verses 1 to 5, we see the serpent tempting the woman in the Garden of Eden and saying that she may eat of the tree. It doesn't matter. You go ahead and take this. Did God really say that you shall not eat of it? And then the serpent tempts with this little tidbit. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened. You will be as God, knowing good and evil. It's the promise of divinity through special knowledge. And in many respects, transhumanism is nothing more than, you could say, a continuation of this ancient lie. And it's the lie, Jan, that permeates all of human history. We're constantly pushing ourselves forwards, either as a society or as individuals, even as governments, to say that we will play God, we can be as God. It is extreme hubris, extreme arrogance. And yet this is the lie that is perpetuated throughout all time in terms of our human civilization. Transhumanism is, you could say, the latest example or the latest manifestation of this old lie. You can become as God. You can live forever. You don't have to die. You have the knowledge of perfection. You can be complete. You can become as a God. You can transcend being human. You can move beyond being human. And so the term transhumanism is actually the idea of this evolution, this step away from humanism into something different. The ultimate result, they call it, is post-human.
Well, hold on, because I think we need to explain to the audience that this is really a blending of technology and human beings, correct?
Correct. It is. It is the blending of technology. It is the, you could say, the monkeying with our DNA now that we can begin to understand our genetic code. It is the integration of robotics.
Yeah.
The list goes on.
Okay, now, you were apparently at a sort of a transhumanism convention. I think it was sponsored by the Mormon Church. And first of all, I do want to ask you, I mean, the Mormons seem to be heavily into this, and maybe that's because of their theology, we are all gods. But there was a Q&A session at a conference on transhumanism hosted by the Mormons. And the comment was made that you heard, quote, "We are now at a Tower of Babel return point. Anything we imagine we can do, there's nothing out of our grasp now." And then you say, see Genesis 11:6. Okay, connect the dots here for us. Go ahead.
Well, at this particular conference, the very first working session was entitled Fear and Trembling at the Tower of Babel. And the discussion was all on you could say the rise, the history and the rise of man's constant attempt to create technologies and to create systems that would elevate us beyond being human. It would take us into, you could say, the next step of our evolution. And evolution is all part of this. In fact, it is premised on evolution. When this particular session was done, that is when these statements came up. People were in the audience, a number of people in the audience were very open about this, saying, well, yes, we've now reached this point. We've reached this point where we have developed technologies to allow us to ascend and more or less to accomplish what the Tower of Babel didn't accomplish. And so that was the context. And I'll have to go back a little bit regarding the Mormon side of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't sponsored by the Mormon church per se, but by a Mormon organization or an organization with Mormon roots, and that's the Mormon Transhumanist Association. I've met some of the people there. They were nice folks, but they certainly had this concept that as evolution and as man's desire to become higher than man takes place, it fits within the Mormon theology. It fits within the Mormon outcome.
Now, the goals of this movement: highly advanced intellectual capabilities, bodies immune to disease and aging, communication without speech or visual aids, and en masse, superhuman strength and agility. That's just a few. The means to this end include DNA manipulation, brain-computer interfacing, the injections of nanobit technology to manipulate human tissue. All right. This is getting into Twilight Zone, Star Trek, Star Wars. This is a little bit hard for all of us to grasp, because I think people are just starting to get caught up with technology, and now we overwhelm them with transhumanism. What I just offered here, the goals of transhumanism: brain-computer interfacing, injections of nanobot technology. I think some dials are going to be turned off if we don't make it more interesting.
Yes, it sounds bizarre.
Yeah,
it's
too bizarre.
Out of this world.
Yeah.
And yet we have been monkeying with at least plant DNA, plant genetics, since the 1960s. I come from a farming community. My background is in agriculture. I'm a farm boy at heart. When we go and plant canola and we put that in the ground, it's no longer true canola. It's modified canola. It's canola plus, because we have introduced changes into the genetic quality of that particular plant to move it into certain, to have it move into certain desirable traits. Disease prone. It does things we want it to do. So we've been doing this already at a genetic level for a long time with plants. We've also been doing it with animals to a certain extent. This isn't something that's new. It's actually been going on for a long time. We've just now are opening up an ethical Pandora's box, in the sense that we're asking the question, can we do this with human beings? Can we create a better human? Can we create something that is not human? Can we integrate the DNA and the genetic characteristics of certain species into our own? It sounds bizarre, and it may never even succeed. And this is something that we've kind of talked about even before the show. This may not even succeed. My concern is, as suggested in your introduction, what in the world, what kind of problems will we see?
Yeah.
What in the world will go wrong with this experiment?
Yeah, and yet I think you suggest that if a Christian were offered the opportunity, as I stated earlier, to live to be 150 years in excellent health, thanks to this transhumanism effort, a lot of Christians might be willing to go along with this. I mean, the dark side would be set aside, and the value of it would supersede the dark side, just like some, as you said, your example, some saw there were enough values, for instance, to socialism, that the dark side has been set aside. You can go even, say it even stronger, the dark side of communism was set aside. And then folks looked only at the supposed, not that there is any good side to these things. I don't believe there is, but you know what I'm trying to say. So some would say, okay, let's try it.
Yes, let's look to see this fabled, promised utopian world. And realistically, transhumanism, in a sense, is just a continuation of that idea. We have a utopian carrot dangled in front of us. We just need to bite it. We just need to take hold of the fruit and go with it. And that's the, you could say, the backdrop to this entire setting of transhumanism. I know that for your audience, this may be a fairly new term, but I guarantee you, as time progresses, your audience will hear this phrase used an awful lot.
Okay.
Transhumanism, posthumanism, and they also like to use the term humanity plus.
Well, here's what I found interesting. I was doing a little research on this, and folks, you can learn more at Carl Teichrib's website, forcingchange.org. I think it's interesting that the military, Department of Defense, is really interested in this because, again, they are trying to find the perfect soldier. And to get that perfect soldier, they're willing to do some of the experiments and some of the blending of technology in human beings that's going to be necessary. Do you ever think they're going to get to the perfect soldier? And I don't mean perfect, but I mean one of the best human beings that ever was invented. I didn't say created.
I don't know. And again, you could say some of my concern is what will be the accidents along the way.
Yeah.
But the perfect soldier would be one who would have incredible endurance, incredible lung capacity, super strong muscular and a super strong frame, and also integrated with his weapon system. And this is something that I know has been talked about within the military an awful lot. Let's integrate the weapon systems into our through satellite technology, through GPS technology, integrate the entire process of the battlefield, right from the soldier to his weapon, to command, to the decision makers who will be in Washington, D.C. or in Tampa Bay or wherever they may be. And so this is something that's been going on for a while. In fact, there's been terms used such as revolution in military affairs, net-centric warfare, some very technical lingo that's been thrown around within military circles for a long time. And while none of that is necessarily transhuman, it fits part and parcel with this idea that we can now create a battle zone and a soldier to fit that battle zone, and we will have technical superiority in every fashion. Right down to the individual on the ground.
All right. Well, you also say in the things that you've written about this that emergent spirituality and interfaithism within the church will dovetail with transhuman sentiments. I'm not sure I understand that.
Well, one of the big things with transhumanism as a social movement is that it looks to create a global society. This isn't about necessarily an individual succeeding. This is about humanity moving forward. And so they realize that all aspects of human social interaction will have to change in order to fit this transhuman ideal. And the big part of that, and this is finally starting to be recognized within transhumanist circles, is religion. For the most part, transhumanists have been either agnostic or atheist.